You are listening to the Mindset Forge podcast. I am Barton Bryce, your host. I'm an athlete, performing artist. I love helping people find a way to be 1% better each and every week through this podcast. I interview athletes and performing artists and how they get to the highest level. And today, this interview is no exception. I've got Bryce Campbell. He is a professional rugby player and the captain of the USA rugby team as they're getting prepared to go to World Championships in Dubai in 2023. Our conversation today goes all over the place. He actually helps explain rugby to some of us like myself. I'll be the first to admit I have never seen a rugby match. And so a lot of my parallels to rugby are like being on a team in basketball. So in this interview, forgive my lack of understanding if you're a true rugby fan. He does do a great job of explaining rugby, how he works with the team, how he's a leader with the team, and how the USA rugby team is preparing for World Championships. He also talks about a day when he was in San Diego with his professional Austin rugby team, and they went to BUDS training. Yeah, because BUDS for Navy SEALs is right there at Coronado Island. He actually got a chance with his team to go through a day of BUDS training. He talks about that and just how crazy and difficult that was, but how important it was for galvanizing his team. One takeaway I want you to listen for is when he talks about ego, or the lack of ego necessary to be a leader of a team like the USA rugby team. It's fascinating stuff. So buckle up, get ready, because here's my interview with Bryce Campbell. Okay, I'm here with Bryce Campbell, USA rugby player, also a professional rugby player here in Austin, Texas, and has played overseas. Really excited to talk to you, Bryce, not just about rugby, but your life, Navy SEALs training, a lot of things that kind of brought you to where you are today and your mindset around how you show up for big moments. So thanks for being here, Bryce.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Barton. Excited for the conversation.
So I got to find out, why is your nickname Bobby Dice? Is there an interesting story there?
Yeah, it's a family nickname. I've got an older brother. He's 2 years older than me. When I was a baby, he struggled saying baby Bryce. He said Bobby Dice.
Oh,
And then
so cute.
my dad ran with it. And so I've been Bobby D, Bobby Dice my entire life. A lot of people think my name's Bob, but
Right.
it's not. But might as well be. I go by both.
So you growing up, how many siblings? Like, where are you in that kind of group? Of your siblings?
Just me and the older brother.
Okay.
Just the two of us.
Nice.
And yeah, we grew up playing sports together. He was a rugby player as well.
So rugby from an early age, was that something that you were kind of attracted to early on?
Relatively to other people, yeah. But I started off playing football, basketball, and baseball from Indianapolis. I really loved football as a young kid. And just some friends introduced me to rugby when I was in middle school. And so I would play football in the fall and rugby in the spring. And as it went on, I liked rugby more and more. And I still enjoyed football. I played through high school, but just this sport allows you to do so many different things and test yourself in different areas. And I just loved it and stuck with it.
Yeah. So for those who don't kind of understand the full scope of the sport of rugby, why don't you give us a synopsis of like what happens on a rugby field, besides the fact that you're not wearing any like padding and you're out there just like colliding into each other. Like, talk about the point of it and like what you love about it.
I guess to put things into context, maybe like American football was born from rugby, kind of changed rules, and then was born American football. So you kind of strip that back, and it's a little bit more of a fluid game. So there's 15 players in each team that are playing at one time. No padding. Some guys wear what look like old school leather football helmet. They're not leather, but it's almost like a head guard. It's called a scrum cap. But object of the game is to score the ball at the other end, just like football would be. But everyone plays offense. Everyone plays defense. The way the game is run is similar to soccer, and where it just the clock keeps running. There's no stoppages. To score, you actually have to put the ball down at the other end. And when you get tackled, instead of the play stopping, you put the ball back towards your team. Your teammates kind of block the other team from getting the ball. Someone comes up, picks the ball up, and play just continues. So everyone on the field has to be able to pass the ball, tackle, run the ball. A handful of people need to kick. So you have to be a pretty well-rounded athlete to be able to play. And then there's specific things. I'm sure a lot of people may not know much about rugby, but they've seen a scrum before, pictures of it, and that's when all the 8 guys on each team push each other to try to win the ball, and it's just a way to start the game back up again once there's been a forward pass or a knock on. So you can only pass the ball sideways or backwards. You can't pass forward, but you can kick the ball forward and regather it to retain possession.
Gotcha.
I kind of bounced around a bit.
That's you know, you got to see it.
Watching.
Right, you got to kind of see it to understand it. Talk about playing in Europe for years. Just what was that like? I mean, going from a sport in America that was maybe a fringe sport in terms of like the popularity to a place where football and rugby, soccer and rugby, and is really like the sports out there. So talk about that experience.
Yeah, that was awesome for me because I grew up playing here where not many people knew about rugby. So going to a place where it's one of the main sports, it's always on TV. You go to a pub, it's on. Massive supporting groups for every team. It's just really cool. And yeah, for me, I just wanted it to be like that in the U.S. and it'll get there someday. But yeah, it was cool to be a part of something that a lot of people cared about. Not that they don't hear, but and it's different.
It's different,
it's
right?
Just different.
Yeah. It'd be like playing American football in Europe and then coming over here and going
exactly.
like, "Whoa, what?" Yeah,
exactly.
I remember. I'm old enough to remember 1984 when the Olympics, and I think the World Cup soccer came to LA, and I lived in California, and I remember all my friends' parents talking about how great soccer was and trying to just hoping that it would catch on. And fast forward 40 years later, basically, and I went to the Austin FC game about a month ago, and it was bonkers. Mm-hmm. Everyone's all into soccer now, but it took a long time. It really took. It was a slow grow, and so let's hope that for rugby. But rugby has an American, there's an American rugby team, our national team. You're with them right now in Colorado, preparing for the World Championships or the to get to the World Championships. Talk about that experience right now and just give us some perspective on the American rugby team.
Yeah. So in Austin, I play for the Austin Go-Groanies who compete in Major League Rugby. So we've got 13 teams, but aside from that, we've got a national team, USA Rugby, who compete towards the World Cup. And so we've got a handful of guys from all the MLR teams and a few guys that play overseas, like I did a few years ago, that come together during international periods to compete for our country. And right now, we're in training camp for a couple of weeks before we go play a couple of games in South Africa against some clubs there, and then we've got a really, really big tournament in Dubai where we need to beat Kenya, Hong Kong, and Portugal to qualify for the World Cup, which is next year in France. But right now, we're just heads down, working hard, trying to get better each day so that we're as prepared as possible for those games. We've got a lot of newer guys in the mix, which is because of the professional league here and how that's picked up. The player pool is expanded, and it's really exciting for the game as we close the gap between us and some of the more well-known rugby nations out there. So we're right around 17th to 20th in the world currently, and next couple of years, hopefully we break the top 10. But right now we're just focusing on getting better so that we can qualify for the World Cup.
And of those 3 teams, who's the juggernaut that you really focused on?
Portugal is definitely the best of the 3 right now. Mm-hmm. We have in rugby is some smaller nations compete with their national team pretty much year round. So they're really cohesive. They play together year round. For us, we're a bit of a different story because we all are spread across the U.S. and across the world, really, and then we come together. So in some respects, it's a positive, and then some respects it's a challenge because we're all coming from different teams to come together. Um, but some of these smaller countries have become really good over the past handful of years because they've consolidated their national teams into professional teams. They're really cohesive, and um, just across the globe, the competition is getting better and better, and we need to do the same. So, um,
Talk about, teamwork in rugby. I think there's different athletes, different sports require like kind of a precision individual mindset, like a swimmer or gymnast, something like that. But in rugby, you talk about have to be able to do everything well. But there's that team piece of it where you have to really like be with your team and work together. Talk about the mindset of like being an elite rugby player and what that takes.
what I love so much about the sport is another. You really have to rely and trust your teammates more than any other sport. I feel, um, if I'm trying to make a tackle, I need to trust the guy inside me that if he steps back, he's going to make it for me. Or if I get tackled, I need to trust that my teammate protects me from them stealing the ball. And the physical aspect of the game is so demanding that you need to be able to make decisions on the fly. You need to be able to make big collisions, get up, run. The team aspect is almost. I mean, I wouldn't know, but people have people have said it's similar to war in a way where you're always covering the guy inside out, outside you. If you're not on the same page, everything will hit the fan. Um, it's just for me, it's a complete team sport,
Mm-hmm.
because people do have special skills, but everyone has to have um, generic abilities to, like I said earlier, to run, pass, tackle, and it's just there's no feeling like giving literally everything you have with the guys around you, and um, just being completely drained after 80 minutes of a game. Where
Yeah.
in other sports, I don't know. It's just for me, it's just the perfect sport because you have to be able to do it all.
Yeah, go deeper with that. Like, I think you could have played football. You're from Indiana, so basketball, Larry Bird. I mean, there's this whole tradition out there for basketball. What do you think it is about rugby? You talk about the perfect kind of sport for you. Like, what is that kind of indescribable thing?
You just there's a there's a trust and connection with the team that is so deep because you see each other go to the depths of what they're capable of on a weekly basis, or even in training. It's such a demanding sport that you need to be able to empty the tank consistently, and you just build a bond that's unlike anything I've experienced. And I loved playing football. Don't get me wrong. I was a middle linebacker in high school. We were a pretty successful team. Played for Cathedral High School in Indianapolis. But the way the game stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, um, unless you're really like a running back, you're probably not giving everything you have, because it's just the sport doesn't demand as much, um, at least cardiovascularly, as rugby would, where you have to, in a game, I may run 3-4 miles in a rugby game and make 20 tackles and carry the ball 12 times. Whereas in football, I'm maybe 5 minutes of in play and I've made 10 tackles. It's just the demands of the sport. It just takes so much out of you that you really figure out what your teammates are made of.
Yeah. What about the fact that you're really not there's no padding, right? You're out there, like it's a little bit more like war than football because football you got pads all over, you got a big helmet. Like, I mean, obviously there's still injuries with football, but there is something about like you and your brothers there's no pads. Like it is just like you're crashing into these people. Like what is it about that kind of the toughness of you and your team that like you just feel so much maybe more acutely with rugby?
It forces you to be aware of your technique a lot. You don't have padding. If you get it wrong, you're not going to play for very long. So it forces you to know how to tackle well, to know, when you can throw yourself into someone and when you probably shouldn't. And yeah, it's a very intimate sport in that way because you have to be vulnerable and put yourself in places that a lot of people wouldn't put themselves. So
you talk about like going to war and the experience there. And I know that you haven't gone to war, but I think there is something. There's an analogy there in this, like, the trust and the vulnerability you have to have with the people on your team in order to truly like let go and go all out and like really like leave it all on the field. You did go through Bud's training. Talk about that experience and then kind of bring it back to rugby and kind of what you learned from Navy SEALs training and how that's impacted you in your professional career.
Yeah, sure. It was just one day, probably the longest day of my life. With the Austin team, we did a preseason camp in Chula Vista, California, down south of San Diego. There's a Olympic training center there where we just had camp. And then one of the days, there was 4 Navy SEALs that came in and put us through some training. And then at the end of the camp, we had a trial match against San Diego. But for that day, we were woken up at like 4 a.m. On the bus. We went to the beach near, what was it? Imperial Beach? Or was it Coronado Beach?
Yeah, I think it is Coronado. The big bridge going over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
the Coronado.
Beach.
You're right.
And we had to do almost like water torture for a while. Get wet and sandy, we jump in the water, and it was January, so the water was pretty chilly. Go roll around in the sand until there wasn't an inch of us that didn't have sand on it. But it's just a really intense training. And then we finished up when the sun came up around 7 a.m. We all got in the bus. We're really excited because we was done. And then we got back to the training camp, and here comes the Jeep of the SEALs coming around the corner, and we realized it was only getting started. So yeah, we did some evolutions where one of the SEALs would do a class, and then we'd have to go do some physical training, come back, class, physical training, back and forth for what was, I don't know, we started at 4 a.m, finished around 8 p.m. But kind of the biggest takeaways were figuring out that your limits are a lot further than you think they are, and how to communicate when your tank is empty. I think that's one of the most important things, and one of the most relatable things for rugby is when you're completely gassed on the field, you need to be able to communicate with the guys around you, and there's a really good takeaway from the whole experience.
So like when you mean by that is like the kind of the vulnerability of being able to say honestly, like, I know, because, and Goggins talks about this, and a lot of people talk about like that we think we're empty and we still have like 60% left in the tank, and to know to understand where you're truly at empty and where you just need to like kind of push through the weak mindset, or like, you don't know yourself yet. So it's that like knowing how far you can go, and then when you get there, know that it's, you got to tell your team.
And also knowing that when you're in a team, knowing when to say, look, I need help for a minute, and can you help me so that I can get my energy back, so that I can help others around me. So there was a portion of the training where we had like a 40-pound sandbag, a small log, and a really big log, and then between like five of us, we had to carry the three items. So there'd be like three people on the big log, two on the small log, and then one on the bag. And the logs were, or the big log was a lot harder than the other things. So just getting the rotation right, where one person needs a break, voicing that out so that you don't lose someone, and understanding how to share the load throughout training, and knowing when to you need to just toughen up, and then when you need to, all right, I'm in trouble here, help me out, and then I'll help you out when you need it. So,
and that's not easy because I think of myself. I'm the type of person that I would just bite my lip, and I wouldn't want to show weakness, right? I wouldn't want to call or ring the bell, if you use the old term of the Navy SEALs. But I think there's something so important about that, is like trusting that your brother's got your back, trusting that your team is there to kind of show up. What did you learn about leadership? Because I know for the Austin team, you're the team captain, and what have you learned from not just that day, but like on your team? Like, what is it about being a leader of a team of really tough elite athletes that allows you to be their leader and to be respected in that way, but also to get the most out of your team?
I think one of the biggest things for me was I don't know it all. I don't know much actually, but leaning on the experiences and the knowledge of others around me to, when we do need direction, to give that direction, and also to seek advice from the people around me to put us in the best areas and the best mindset. Is an honor to lead a group of men that is so fun and accomplished, and just being a servant to the guys, being a conduit between the coaching staff and the players, and knowing that I don't need to know everything in order to be a good leader. And the biggest thing for me is just being an example. Best thing I can do is to take care of my own stuff and just be an example for others to follow. So, those just a few things.
Yeah, I think that's you talk about not being able to not know it all, or just being able to show people that you don't have all the answers, but you're gonna help them out. I think that's the humility of not letting the almighty ego show up. Talk about ego. I mean, I think in there's a lot of ego in athletics, in high achievement, in sports and such. But how have you learned to kind of keep your ego out of it, or kind of keep it in check so that you can be your best and you can lead on a team?
Ego just kind of gets in the way of trust, and I probably never thought of myself in such a high regard to be lumped into, I don't know, that category. I've always looked up to people, and I fail to realize sometimes that a lot of people look up to me, and people with big egos don't last very long in leadership. There's just not much of a place for it, and at least in rugby, because just the amount of trust that you need to have within a group. You're not going to get the best out of the people around you if they don't trust you, and if you have an ego, they're not going to trust you. So, yeah.
So let's go back to childhood again. I mean, you talked about you and your brother playing all the different sports, growing up. Like, think about some key moments. If you're looking back, I think hindsight's oftentimes 20/20. We can look back and kind of like, that was a moment for me that shifted the way I saw things or did things. Like, is there a moment or two in your childhood that were really pivotal, whether it was a really bad moment that shifted, or just a lesson that really stands out to you?
Well, one thing I think back to, so my brother was 2 years older than me when I was a sophomore in high school, and he was a senior. we were playing the national rugby tournament. We were in Salt Lake City, and there was a pretty historic team called Highland. It was actually a movie about them. But we were playing in the semifinals against them, and I probably thought I was a bit of a, better than I was, maybe, because I was a younger kid starting on the team, and um, remember I was carrying the ball like a couple meters from the line, and this guy on the other team literally like picks me up, strips the ball off me, passes the ball to another teammate. They kick it down the field, they regather it, and then they score. And it was just a realization that I've got a long way to go. That there's guys out there that are on a completely different level to me. So, one, put myself in check, and two, work really hard to close that gap and be a better player. So they went on to beat us pretty good. And my brother always gives me crap about that one play, but it
Like
happened to
that was the
several other
play
guys
that
later on.
that
Later on in the game, it was just the first one for it to happen to. But then
well,
we
it's
ended up coming.
a good older brother is there to remind you of all those
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
yeah. Especially since you know he was a pretty big guy, um, strong, great athlete, and then once probably 1 year after that, I grew a bit bigger than him, and I kind of went on in my career. Um, he always keeps those little things when we were younger, when he had the upper hand on me, and now that the tables have turned a bit, he still holds on to those things. Can't blame him for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but no.
Yeah.
After that, we came back. We ended up finishing third that year. Then the next year, we ended up winning the whole thing. So we grew quite a lot from getting beaten pretty good. You learn a lot more when you get beat than when you're winning, I think. So
Yeah, especially when you have like a kind of a historically good team like Highland
mhm.
that it's kind of your nemesis. You come back the next year, everybody's got to work 10 times harder. You have this like vision of this like elite team that you've got to take down.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, I think the older brother thing too. I mean, I have an older brother 2 years older than me. We're both, 6'4", 6'5". But I like just the battles of one-on-one basketball in our front yard, and like I could never beat him. It was just like, just the roller coaster ride of that, like galvanized something in me that I didn't realize until much later in terms of just competitiveness and like wanting to just, like vanquish the great older brother. So cool that you have that experience for yourself with your older brother.
Yeah.
Talk, let's say there's a sophomore, junior, that younger age, like you were that year that you guys lost to Highland, like that's trying to figure out like how can I get better? What do I need to be focused on? Like how can I just shift my mindset a little bit, make myself that much more ready for that next level of competition? Like what kind of advice would you give to a young athlete who's beyond just like hit the gym, or get better at something in the sport? Like how might you guide them?
Um, when you're young, you have to find the things that you're really uncomfortable with. I always liked the gym, so that like lifting weights was never much of an issue for me. But um, running a ton of sprints and running longer distances was not my not my thing. So forcing yourself to do the uncomfortable things, especially when you don't want to, um, is what makes you better and makes you be able to face adversity when you need to. Um, so you can pass the ball, like maybe you're you see yourself as really skillful with your passing and kicking ability, but you need to work on your tackling. So finding time to focus on the skills that you really need to have to make it to the next level, um, and just finding people around you that are of similar goals. Um, because you can't do it alone. You need to have a group of people that are all, striving to be better. And you need help along the process. So seeking people that want to do special things and training with them, working out with them, pushing each other, is what I would say.
Yeah. For you individually as an athlete, like what are you specifically working on? And before I let you answer that, this thought came to me right now when you're talking about that. I think there's this whole kind of leadership concept around like strength finder, like lean into your strengths. But I feel like there's people don't want to work on their weaknesses. Like it's so like, well, I'm good at this. I'm going to really like go all into like shooting threes like Steph Curry, or, I'm just going to only practice, tackling or something like that. Or I'm just going to work out in the gym because I love working out, and avoiding the sprints or avoiding those other things that aren't their strong suit. Like, I think that's such a key piece of how we get to be elite. How do we get to that next level? It's like being willing to be uncomfortable and working on those places that are still kind of we're trying to bring up. So even at this level, you're playing for the USA team and all that. Like, what are you working on a daily basis? Like, what's your focus in terms of improving your athleticism and performance?
You have to know what you're good at, because that's almost the reason you're there. So for me, rugby wise, I'm pretty consistent in my carrying ability, pretty good tackler, and I look after the ball. So I try not to make many mistakes. So like those are the like backbone of the way I play the game, is carry hard, tackle hard, look after the ball. And those are the things that kind of got me in the door, and would have kind of kept me here. But if I want to make it to another level up, I need to broaden my skill set. So for me, the ability to put the ball in my foot and kick is pretty valuable in my position. And that will help the other parts of my game because I'll be a bit more deceptive. So that's been a big work on for me over the past year or so, getting confident with being able to kick the ball. Because if someone's trying to tackle you and they know you're going to run the ball, it's a lot easier to tackle you. But if you may kick it, you may pass it, you may run it, it's a lot harder for them to know what you're going to do. So being more well-rounded is really important. And there's a difference between training your weaknesses and training. Like, I'm not someone who would train things that aren't actually going to make me a better player, but there are things that I may not be good at that will make me a better player. So you have to find the things that are going to pay off. Like, don't go working on things that you're not good at that aren't going to actually make you better, if that makes any sense.
What's an example of that?
I'm rambling.
No. I think that, but I always going to default to using basketball as an analogy because that was my sport growing up. But yeah, it does make some sense. If you're a postman and you're just not going to be a 3-point shooter, and you're 25 years old and you're trying to make it in the NBA, maybe you're not spending all hours of the day shooting threes, but getting slightly better at the footwork around post-up moves or your fadeaway jump shot or something like that. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, don't try to do something that you're never going to need to do.
Right.
But work on the things that are going to improve your strengths, because it makes you more well-rounded. So
to use that analogy, if you're a post-up player and you really have difficulty turning to your left and using your left hand, and the defenders know that, you're dead, because they could just play up play you out to the right, make you force you left, and then you got no moves. Same thing with your kick. If they know, hey, well, Bryce, he struggles at accuracy with it, kicking, then they're going to play that. They're going to play to that weakness and shut you down.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a chess match, right? Mm-hmm. So take us to elite competition. Like, fast forward, you're playing Portugal, and that's in South Africa.
That one's in Dubai.
Oh, that's in Dubai. Okay,
in Dubai.
So you're in Dubai. You match against Portugal. Like, what are some of the things that are happening in that like 70th to 80th minute of the game that are just like make or break? If the score is tied, it's 10 minutes to go in the game. Everyone's like basically like their tank is low. What are the things that you're saying to your team? What are the things you're doing, you're thinking that are going to help you guys, finish strong?
So depending on the context, whether we're winning or losing and need to score, rugby is a game where you need to be in the moment, focusing on your next task, because there's a lot of moving parts. So if you start thinking about something else, you're going to miss what you have to do now. So for instance, if we're running a play and I just need to catch the ball, but I'm already thinking about the pass that I need to make after it, well, first I just need to catch the ball. So reminding the guys of the hard work that we've put in to be able to be here is important. So in Austin, for example, the day that we had our Navy SEALs training was January 10th. And when there were times in the field where we just needed to man up and say we had to defend our line, we'd say 110. And it was just a reminder that your tank there's still some left in there.
I love that.
So just having little like key words that mean something to your group, just as a reminder that you got this and we've got this as a group, is important. And making sure you don't put the blinders on. So for me, in my position, I need to be able to see the field and see where there's space. If I'm just thinking about catching the ball and running, I may miss an opportunity to pass the ball to a teammate who's in a better position to go score. Mm-hmm. So when you're really, really feeling it, still looking up and seeing what's going on so that you can make the best decision.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to like go one-on-one, like imagine in basketball, like LeBron takes the ball and just dribbles it, and he's like, I'm just going one-on-one against this guy. I'm going to win the game for the team. Like you're not thinking that way. You're thinking, I got this team here. If I'm thinking, blinders on, I'm missing the opportunity to score, the best opportunity. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's the, well, you can't, so you can run forward, you can pass sideways, and you can kick forward, right? That's
correct.
Right.
Correct.
So if you've got, if you've got people you can pass to left and right, you can move that ball so much faster than you can run.
Yeah. Or so in rugby, you have to cover the backfield with people, because I can kick the ball into the, say, 25 yards forward and 25 yards to the left where there's no one, and then one of the guys on my outside can run and get the ball and score. So you have to have a pretty good awareness of not only where your teammates are, but where the opponents aren't. So yeah, it's a pretty challenging but exciting game, because there's so many different ways to break down the defense. Because you can try to look for holes in where the defenders are lined up, or you can, if their defensive line is solid, there's probably space in behind them, so we kick over the top to run onto it and score. So you have to be able to identify where the weakness is. It's because it's got to be somewhere. And
are you playing on basically a football field or a soccer field size?
Yeah, it's a bit bigger than a football field, so it's 100 meters by 70 meters wide.
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
So it's just a little bit bigger than a soccer field.
Gotcha. All right, so is there anything that you've learned to do? I mean, in a big game, whether it's let's say you're in Dubai, big game, the pregame, you guys are in the locker room, you're kind of preparing. Is there anything you're doing mentally, something you've learned that's really works for you that whether it's breathing, whether it's just like a mantra you have, like, how are you preparing your body and mind for high performance?
So I used to listen to a lot of music in pregame, but more recently, over the past year, I've kind of taken them out because I enjoy the sounds of everyone preparing, and helps me to be more connected with the guys around me. Because when I used to listen to just music, I would kind of shut down and just focus on myself. But I like to either shake hands or contact each of my teammates at some stage during the pregame. And then I do have like a stretch and warm up routine that I do to a T before every game that make sure everything's working properly. And then just before we go on the field, like before I cross the white line, I stop for a second, do a few breaths, and then step onto the field. It's just a little routine, and I kind of like I say to myself in my mind, like, you're here for a reason, and then I just kind of step on the field, and allows me to be present.
Yeah, I like that. It's much like stepping on stage. Like the moment you pass that curtain, you're kind of stepping into a place, like a space within yourself, that's really cool. I like, they also think, as a captain or as somebody who thinks about others and how the team's going to perform. I like that, you've kind of taken the music away, like that kind of blinders of like, I'm in my own zone. I'm about me right now, and saying, okay, I'm connecting, I'm checking in with my team. I'm getting a pulse of the team's energy, knowing that that's probably going to be more important, when you get on the field and the team feeling connected and the team feeling, that kind of intrinsic, trust.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm a gym rat. You talk about loving being in the gym. Like, not right now, because at this level, you're probably specifically working on some, things that you're 26, 27. Is that right?
27.
27.
Yeah,
so
28 soon.
Yeah, go back, 10 years or so, or coach yourself 10 years ago, right? Like 17, 18-year-old athlete, like, what do you realize now that, like, man, if I could do it differently, or if I would double down on doing these things more so than, this, to get your body really strong and ready for, for the type of athleticism that you need to have right now?
Mm-hmm. If I could go back, I would definitely sprint and jump more. I'm pretty strong, especially relatively for my position. Pretty good engine in terms of being able to work hard for a long period of time, but just working more on plyometrics and that burst of speed is super valuable in my position. And I would say it's bad, but it's the thing that kind of sets the best apart is just that ability to accelerate and then being able to sprint really fast. So probably focus a little bit less on the weights and more on my ability to move my body, be able to sprint and accelerate in different directions.
Yeah. So the Dubai tournament, when is that?
That is the first 3 weeks of November.
Okay, so you've got that, which is a big deal, but something a little bit bigger is coming up for you in January. Talk about what's happening early January. That's a big deal in your life.
I'm going to be a father.
Yeah.
My wife, Lucy, we're going to have a baby girl, and due date's January 2nd. So getting our lives prepared for that, it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's huge new chapter for you and Lucy and your daughter that's on the way. And now, so you've got it. If Dubai happens and you guys make it into the World Cup, when will the World Cup be in France?
That'd be in September of next year in France. September, October, France.
So you make it, you qualify, then you've got 9 months or so to really like work, kind of get ready for it and get the team gelling and all that kind of stuff. Awesome.
That's right, and then hopefully I'll be holding our baby girl after a game and on the field with her little earmuffs on.
Like Lion King. Well, man, that's awesome. I really appreciate your time. This has been, really, really interesting to me. I learned a lot about rugby, but also I just think every sport, every perspective is different, but like adds a little bit to the kind of overall understanding of, how we can show up better for the big moments of life. I mean, I'm a dad. I got an 8-year-old son, and I constantly think about when I walk in the door. And this is maybe something for you. When you walk in that door, and your wife and your baby daughter are there, it's like, doesn't matter what happened outside. You got to walk in like you're walking on the field and be present and just, and it's a very, so all those things, they all, there's lessons to be taken from all the things that people do in sports, in theater, and bringing them to life. So best of luck to you, Bryce.
Thank you so much, Barton. Really just appreciate you having me on, and hopefully I could add some value for your listeners, and thank you.
For more information on Bryce and the USA Rugby team, check out the show notes for some links. Again, thank you so much for listening. By the way, next week we are celebrating our 2-year anniversary with the Mindset Forge podcast. So get ready for some opportunities to get a t-shirt and represent the Mindset Forge. Keep listening, keep sharing, and let's level up that mindset 1% each and every week. Thanks again for listening to the Mindset Forge podcast.